Good morning. Can everyone hear me? Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Nar Ganapathy, and we will be having a panel on device applications. And essentially, it's a Q&A session, and you can ask any questions on device applications, and one of us will be able to answer them, hopefully. The slide deck itself is pretty short. We will start with a set of resources. Most of you must have attended the device apps presentation by Joseph, and so you must have had a pretty good introduction to device applications. One of the key aspects of a device application is that it is so broad. We have device applications for printers and custom devices. We have webcams, mobile broadband, and so on. So there's so many ways you can, so many devices for which you can write Windows Store applications, and so the set of details that one needs to understand is pretty broad. And so we have a pretty large panel with specific expertise on for each of the device classes. Like we have expertise on portable devices, webcams, general device access, mobile broadband, and so on. So hopefully you'll be able to get your questions answered with some detail. So I'll start off with a set of pointers resources. To be honest, between last build presentation and this build, we really didn't change a whole lot about the basic design of the Windows Store app for devices. And so most of the presentations from the last build conference is still pretty good as a reference. So this essentially lists all the presentations. You can go and find them on Channel 9. You can also look for documentation on MSDN, and they should be able to give you a pretty good idea of what to do for each of these device classes. So for example, you can see applications. There's a presentation that's Windows Store apps in general for devices. There's one for printer and one for camera, one for mobile broadband, and then device scenarios like autoplay. And here are a set of resources. Again, we have this Windows Store Device Apps workshop that was done some time back, and there are a bunch of useful links here to the content from that workshop. Before we get into the Q&A, we'll be using these terms like OEMs, IHVs, ISVs quite a bit in the Q&A. So are you all familiar with those terms? If you don't know, please raise your hand. Okay, awesome. So how many of you are here from are an OEM? IHVs? Quite a bit. And ISVs? Okay, a few. Okay, awesome. With that, let me open it up to Q&A. Before we open it up, I would like to introduce the panel. So I will start introducing myself, and then I will let the panelists introduce themselves one by one. So my name is Nar Ganapathy, and I've been working in Windows since 1998, and mostly on devices and I/O manager and I/O subsystem. I'm in the development track, and I worked on drivers and driver models and device architecture and so on and so forth.
Hi, I'm Peter Wieland. I've been a developer at Microsoft since 1995. I've worked on driver technologies pretty much my entire career. And in 8, relevant to this, I am the owner of the custom device access sample application and driver.
Hey, I'm Paul Slivowitz. I've worked for NAR for a long time, owning the I/O manager, and for 8, I did a lot of the work for the backend for all this device app stuff, and also the custom driver access work.
My name is Joseph Angari. I'm a program manager with the Windows ecosystem team, and I focus on partners who are building peripheral devices.
Hi, my name is Frank Giorgeni. I'm a developer. I've been on Windows since Windows Vista, and I worked on the new printer driver model that was introduced in Windows 8 and the new Metro printing in Windows 8.
I'm Steve Shellick. I've been a developer in Windows for about 4 years. In 8, I worked on the camera UI features.
I'm Mitsuru Saito. I'm a program manager, and I joined Microsoft in 1998, and I have been working for the devices. And for the Windows 8, I focus on the device metadata package and device setup.
Hi, my name is Lisa Ong, and I'm a developer in Windows, and I worked on removable storage, device apps, and portable devices.
I'm George Roussos. I'm a program manager, and I've been with Microsoft over 20 years. For Windows 8, I focused on device enumeration and device access for store apps, as well as the custom driver access pivot.
Hi, Noel Anson. I've been in Windows since '97. I work in networking, communications, and wireless stacks.
Okay, thanks, Noel. So we'll start with the Q&A. We have a mic, and so if you raise your hand, she will bring the mic over to you. And afterwards, I will repeat the question because this session is getting recorded, and then one of our panelists can answer it.
Hi, everybody. I was wondering if you could provide some of the details of the modernization of the mechanism that connects an app to a device driver these days. We used to use device I/O control and create file for custom device drivers. What's kind of the recommended path forward these days?
Who wants to take it?
Repeat the question.
So the question is, what is the modern mechanism for connecting a device to an app? Okay.
So for a custom driver, it's really not that different, except we have new API. We have a new API for opening the device that goes through the device access broker to check for permissions and privileges and things like that. And then that gives you back an iDevice I/O control interface, and you can send I/O controls through that interface. You can do synchronous or asynchronous operations. The UI principle for modern apps would say that you do asynchronous operations for just about everything. But it's really not that different. You're talking to your driver, and so you send whatever I/O controls you need to send to that driver. I guess the key thing, though, is you're talking to a custom driver that you've built for that device. There's not an affordance to talk to a system driver or a driver that's integrated deeply into another stack. It's expected to sort of be a top-level component.
So one of the key differences in the new platform is that access to a custom driver, say a WDF custom driver, is by what we call a privileged app, which is an app that's declared in device metadata, and that's declared by the hardware manufacturer for what we call a device container that binds to the device metadata, and that governs which apps can access a custom driver. One thing that's unique about the new platform is it's only privileged store apps can access a custom driver. It's not any and every app like in the desktop world.
Next question.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So it seems like a lot of you are involved with custom drivers, so I think we'll just continue the whole custom driver question theme. I understand the new model and the Windows Store app is tied to the particular driver for the custom hardware. We make hardware and we write drivers for it and have a user mode, DLL API for the custom driver, and then our customers take those and create their own apps to leverage the hardware for their particular application, whatever it may be. And a lot of it is, to visualize data, for example, data acquisition. And so Metro makes or modern UI makes, great for visualizing things, but I don't see a mechanism where we can support people using our hardware to create their own apps to visualize their data, do whatever operations they might be doing today with a traditional desktop app.
What's the question?
Well, so the question is there an option, or is the idea with the new style that the company that makes the hardware must be the one that makes the one and only app that leverages that hardware? Is there a mechanism, or will there be a mechanism whereby someone can purchase our hardware and create their own new, Windows Store type app on top of that hardware?
So the question is basically, is there a way, if I understood you correctly, is there a way for multiple app authors to access something using a custom driver?
Effectively, yes.
Right? Is that correct? So the scenario we focused on in Windows 8 for accessing a custom driver was kind of twofold. The first one was for a peripheral, where the user gets a new peripheral and they get an automatically acquired application for that peripheral provided by the hardware manufacturer.
Right.
By and far, that was the most common case we had seen. So that's what we focused on for peripherals. There's also a slightly different pivot of that that's related for hardware that's built into a PC.
Sure.
For apps that are preloaded with that. But those are basically the scenarios we focused on. Unfortunately, we did not focus on the scenario that you're mentioning about enabling many different apps to access a custom driver in Windows 8. And that I'll just take that as interesting feedback going forward.
Okay, and one short follow-up. Is it possible for multiple Windows Store apps to use the same piece of hardware? I understand the scenario of you plug in, say, a USB device, and that's going to automatically download an app. Can you have a Windows Store app that's not technically a device app, but is still somehow associated with that hardware? So if a customer did go to the store and download that app, they could use it with that peripheral that's plugged in.
Okay, so if I understand your question correctly, it is, can a user have a store app that is not automatically acquired, multiple different apps access a peripheral?
Yes.
And the clarifying question I want to ask there is that peripheral using a custom driver or not?
Sure, it's using a custom driver.
Okay. Well,
I'll make it difficult.
It matters. So the simple answer is, if the peripheral uses a custom driver, only privileged apps can access those.
And that means the one app that's tied to that device.
Yep.
Okay.
Regardless of acquisition mechanism.
Right.
Now, there's another answer, which is if your peripheral does not require a custom driver, say it's a removable storage device, or it's a networked device, then yes, many different apps can access those peripherals using those mechanisms. However, access to a custom driver is restricted to a privileged app.
And custom driver applies to you. Can you have user mode drivers?
UMDF drivers?
UMDF drivers?
Yes.
And those would be considered privileged as well?
The apps that are able to access them are privileged apps.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. My question I asked before, and I was asked to repeat it in this panel. So in my company, we build file system drivers, so no device per se. And the way we do it today, we have we register as a network provider, user mode DLL, and kernel mode driver. My question is, what is the recommended path forward for us, assuming we would like our apps, Windows-style apps now, to be able to access our exposed file system?
So let me repeat the question, and then we will get it answered. So your question is, you have a file system filter driver, a network DLL, and one more thing, right? What was it? I didn't.
No, so we have what is called a legacy driver at this point. So we register as a file system in registry as a network provider, and we expose a file system.
Okay. So you basically have some set of drivers that like enhance system functionality, and you like to have a Metro-style app or a Windows Store app to communicate with that driver. Is that right?
So my question is twofold. How we distribute our app? Currently, we have an installer requires elevation and all that stuff, and apps can access our file system, through UNC Path, Map Drive, and so on. So one question is, how is the distribution model if it's possible to go through Windows Store, and B, if our file system can be accessed through Windows Store apps?
So you also want to distribute your drivers. So if I understand the question correctly, you also want to be able to distribute the drivers through the Windows Store. Is that
some mechanism of distribution? Yes.
Okay. So does anybody want to take it?
I can answer it again if that works for you. The simple answer is that for the scenario where you're trying to interact with a system on the desktop and interact with components that are not within WinRT, we recommend that you continue to deploy that software through the desktop. Like I said in the last talk, the thing that we've built here with WinRT and Windows Store Apps is a trusted environment for users. And if applications can deploy components that interact with other parts of the system and potentially destabilize it, not to suggest that you would do that, but potentially change the way other store apps interact with the system, then it stops being a trusted environment. And so the recommendation is to continue to make that available on the desktop for people to use and take advantage of the value there. If anyone else has anything else that they want to add to that, then.
I think at Joseph's talk, he elaborated on some of the differences in the platforms and the environment. I mean, I think the fundamental thing to really understand about the new store app environment is it's per user, and apps are isolated from each other. There are no long-running processes. And I recognize for some of this audience that that's probably a pretty radical departure from some of the stuff you're used to doing. But it's really important to understand those differences. And so we are focusing on per-user apps as store apps. And that means that some scenarios will make more sense in a desktop environment than in the store app environment.
Like a basic follow-up question, is there a way for Windows drivers like SMB3 driver, can Microsoft's Windows Store app access an SMB share?
So the question is, can a Windows Store app access an SMB share? Is that the question? Mm-hmm. Okay. So we have this. I can answer the question. So we have this concept of the Windows Storage APIs and WinRT, and you can actually go through it has a file picker, and if you can access the share through the file picker, you can access the device apps through that. But the important thing is that the user has to choose the file.
Hey there. Question about device stage. So how does device stage fit into Windows 8, both for the App Store app, the Windows Store apps and the desktop apps?
So the question is about device stage, and how does device stage fit with the Windows 8 device app model? Anybody wants to take it?
So device stage is kind of the desktop experience, and so we provided the WSDA Windows Store device app. So you are going to provide the whole experience by the application in the modern world, instead of just giving the user experience by the device stage limited area. So the point is, WSDA is going to replace the device stage in the Windows 8 world. So if you still want to provide the device stage experience, you can do that, both providing the device stage and the WSDA experience. However, basically what our strategy is, WSDA is going to replace the experience of the device stage. That's what we are thinking about.
So one suggestion is that when you guys ask questions, it'll be good if you tell us about your device class, because that'll give us more. We could probably give you a better answer in that case.
Right. Follow up to the previous question, where you were recommended that for his type of device, it was better to stay with the legacy desktop type of installation. The type of device that I'm working, I also need to do that. And one thing I noticed in Windows 8 is when we go through the installation, the status reported is like the installation went fine, but my special application is blocked from being installed, and there's a little flag in the Action Center that says you have to click here to continue installation. And that little flag is very inconspicuous, and I believe this is going to cause a lot of support calls, because you cannot really see that something is still pending. So my question is there any mechanism where I can prevent this from happening? My driver is WCOLD. It should be trusted, and somehow this is not a good experience.
So the question is, I'll repeat the question. So the question is a question about finish install action. So basically, you have some action to be install an app at the end of a driver installation, and your concern is that currently the guidance to the user to install the application is actually in the action center, and so it's not directly visible to the user.
Correct.
Okay.
So this is also based on our strategy, but what we are thinking is all such kind of device application will be replaced by the modern application. So eventually, such kind of application will be installed by the mechanism of the WSDA. That's what I was thinking about. But we are not getting to that, unfortunately, in the Windows 8. We know some modern application cannot access to some type of the devices. So that's what we are still working on for the next version of the Windows. But for the Windows 8, but in future, even now, we don't strongly not to recommend to use a finish install action to install any application. So to answer your question, sorry, we don't have the good story for that. So users still need to go to the Action Center to finish the driver installation to install your application. But that's what based on our strategy that all application will go to the modern application from the desktop application. So we are still working on that. That's the thinking we are thinking about. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll touch base with you after you to explain the type of devices we have and how this is. We cannot go that way with a new type of applications, and maybe that will help for the future.
So I have a few questions regarding internal devices, devices that are internal to the PC itself. So my understanding is that in those cases, there aren't in the connection of device applications to the hardware is not through the metadata of the driver, but rather through PC metadata. So a few questions regarding that. How is PC metadata updated? For instance, if a user upgrades from Windows 7 to Windows 8, and in Windows 7 there was no PC metadata file for his PC, how would that be generated in an upgrade from Windows 7 to Windows 8? And also in Windows 8 itself, if an OEM would like to add a certain application or remove an application from that metadata, how would that work? And how would the user actually get the experience?
So to repeat your question, so your question is you have some devices that are actually part of the system, and the way you can a Windows Store application can talk to such a device is gated through the device metadata package for the PC, or what we call the PC container. And your question is, if I have a Windows 7 system which doesn't have PC metadata, and you go to a Windows 8 and you want to access the device through a Windows Store app, how do I access that? Where does the metadata come from? And then the second question is, was there a second question?
The second question was how, in Windows 8 itself, how is that metadata updated?
Okay.
To
How is the metadata
add
updated
or remove
for?
a device? Sorry, not a device, but an application that can access the hardware.
Okay.
And how would the user experience it?
Okay.
So for the first question, actually we have the PC device metadata package even in the Windows 7. So you could create a device stage for the PC in the Windows 7. So the PC metadata package will be migrated if you just update the Windows 7 to the Windows 8. So we didn't change anything for the PC metadata package special. So, I mean, my point is you can still create a metadata package for the PC even in the Windows 7. So, and I think you are asking also how you can create a metadata package for the PC. or that's not a problem. Okay, if you understand how to create a metadata package, if you create a metadata package for the PC for the Windows 8, that works even for the Windows 7. Only limitation is we don't download the WSDA automatically. That part will be just ignored in the Windows 7. So if you will create the PC metadata package for the Windows 8, theoretically it works both on the Windows 7 and Windows 8. I hope that answers first to your question.
What about
how it gets refreshed? Yes, for the second question. For the second question,
what about systems that are already deployed and they don't have a metadata on them? They're already deployed in the field.
Correct.
With Windows 7 and...
So that's kind of related to the second question also, but PC is going to get the metadata pack. Even for the PC, it is same with any peripherals. When the PC has a PC container, that happens in the UBI time frame, that PC is going to get the metadata package from the Windows Metadata Information Service when the user connects to the internet. So at that time, as long as your metadata package is on the WIMI server, Windows PC going to get the metadata package from the network. And for the update metadata package scenario, if you update the metadata package in the Microsoft service, that Windows is going to check the metadata package system every 10 days. It depends on the situation, but almost every 10 days. When there is an updated metadata package, we'll get the metadata package from the same server. One thing is, for the PC metadata package, Windows doesn't install the application automatically, so that will not happen. That is a difference from the other peripherals. That is specific for only for the PC. But for the metadata package, the upgrade happens when you update will happen when you submit the new metadata package to the Microsoft server.
So how?
When the OEM updates the metadata package to the Microsoft service.
So how would the user get the application?
OEM need to install the application as a preloaded, or users can install the application manually from the App Store.
So for custom drivers for PC internal, we focused on the scenario where a user gets a new PC preloaded and pre-installed by an OEM. We did not focus on the build your own PC kind of enthusiast scenarios.
Okay. I have a question regarding the printer. When the desktop printer driver, when the driver is rendering some document, they have some kind of event, notification event, like a document is rendering or the page is rendering. To my understanding is this notification event is not available for the Metro style app.
I'm going to see if I reread your question correctly. You're asking, is the document start and page start events that were available in GDI available when they're printing from Windows Store applications?
Yes, yes.
No. By design, the system did not want the driver to present UI to the user at print time. That's the colloquialism you use for that, because the design experience for the Windows Store applications is that the user is in control of the user experience, and we didn't want UI popping up. As you know, the printing actually happens in the background in the Windows Store printing applications, and so the user may have switched away, and we didn't want, for example, them to be pulled back into the app they had switched from just to service the UI.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Another question regarding line of business apps. Can you have a device app that is also a line of business app, and how would that work with the metadata, both for external and for internal devices? Is it possible for an enterprise to have a line of business app that accesses hardware?
So the question is
for a custom driver, of course.
So the question is, you have a custom device, and it is a line of business app that's going to be deployed by the enterprise, and can it talk to a device? Do you want to take it?
So basically, I've already summarized the scenarios we focused on for custom drivers. And so even in the line of business scenario, if you want to have an app access a custom driver, you need a privileged app. It's a simple thing. We did nothing unique for line of business scenarios in Windows 8.
So one more question there is, there's a limitation on the amount of apps that can be in the PC metadata. Are line of business apps also subject to the same number of applications in the PC metadata?
Yes. I mean, I'll add one other thing there, that if you have scenarios and you want to give us feedback on that, please send them to Joseph, that we can take as input and feedback to consider moving forward. But that wasn't something we focused on in Windows 8.
So the email address for Joseph is josn@microsoft.com. So
I would appreciate it if you didn't register me
for Hi. So we write point of sale applications, and obviously we use many peripherals for point of sale, keyboards and screens and printers and scanners and scales and everything. And some of these are obviously custom drivers. Some of them are Oppos, which is a custom driver, but not really. And we're not clear about what we can or cannot do in Windows 8.
So the question is about point-of-sale devices and whether they can be, and some of them require custom drivers and some of them don't. And the question is, what policy should we use? What is the mechanism we can use to write Windows Store apps for such devices?
Yeah, the question is more that can we write our next point of sale in a Windows 8 environment and count on the fact that we will be able to talk to peripherals?
So let me just kind of try and summarize this stuff. We did not do anything unique for point-of-sale applications in Windows 8. If you have a device that needs a custom driver, we've kind of described what is available in Windows 8. If you would like to provide Joseph more details about your scenarios, we can consider that as input and feedback in the future.
Thank you.
You also specifically mentioned access to scan in Windows 8 and access to print in Windows 8. The API model for print is different for Windows Store applications. All of the desktop APIs should work as they had before. Same with the desktop scan APIs. So if you want to build the app for Windows 8 desktop, there's no changes for scan and print. For Windows 8 Store applications, there is currently no scan API surfaced, and the print API is well documented. If you have problems, you can email us.
So point of sale usually doesn't use the standard print API. We directly communicate through serial or parallel ports. Are those available to us on a Windows 8 environment?
On the desktop?
Yes, on the desktop.
So if you have a custom driver, then you can use our custom driver app model to use the Windows Store app to talk to it. So you could, but then it is still restricted by it will still controlled by the same policies. Your device should have device metadata, and that device metadata packet should include your point of sale apps that can talk to it.
I just want to refine the scenario. Sorry, taking so long, but we are just writing the point of sale software, and we are very proud of ourselves by being hardware agnostic. And,
I see.
So we basically go to a retailer and tell them, use whatever the vendor you want. We may have to write a driver or some adapter, but we'll be more than happy to work with. And it seems that now that path is a bit problematic for us. And just I wasn't clear about the answer. Serial device, serial port, can we still communicate with without any need for certification or something like that?
So the key thing here is if there's a custom driver required, then one of the terms we use is that you need to deliver a vertical experience. And so basically the hardware, driver, and application are vertically aligned. As George has mentioned, we don't support horizontal experience if there's a custom driver if a custom driver is required. For point of sale specifically, I know that there are a bunch of different kinds of devices, and one of the mechanisms those devices can use is keyboard emulation, and things like where you have a prefix before and after. I get that it's not the ideal way to do it, but it's certainly workable, and that is available for applications to take advantage of across devices. But where a specific driver is required, then you would have to be vertically aligned.
And direct access to serial and parallel port?
And the access to those is through a custom driver as well.
Thank you.
Thanks. I have two questions. One, the first, you mentioned that everything is keyed off of PNP or PNPX. So if you write a virtual bus driver or pop a PDO and it can be identified with a particular class, then everything should still work as virtual devices work today.
So the question is your question about writing a Windows Store device app to talk to a virtual device? Yes.
What's your scenario?
Well, so that actually gets to the second question. You guys Joseph specifically mentioned second screen as a possibility of these, and if you wanted to extend a screen, say over a network device, and when the device, when you detect that the device is connected, if you pop the appropriate PDO and all the PNP stuff is lined up correctly, then should all of it just work?
So I've heard two different things here, and I'm going to try to clarify my understanding. Please refine it, and then we'll get the right people to answer. So I heard you ask a question about a virtual bus driver and how some store would access it. Then it also seems like you want to have some networked app to do dual screen kind of stuff.
Well, so actually, if I can clear, so the first is just the virtual bus driver question that can kind of stand alone, okay. And then an application of an instance of a virtual bus driver scenario could be a virtual device of a known class, like a display.
Okay. So let me take the first question. Let Mitsuru take the second question. So the custom driver access solution is designed and intended for physical devices. That's what we intended it for, like an external physical peripheral. Exactly. I'll let Mitsuru talk to this.
Actually, does that mean that virtual devices are not supported, or does it just mean that the virtual device needs to look to different layers of the system like a physical device?
It was not a scenario we targeted for Windows 8.
Okay.
I mean, so like the scenario we targeted for peripherals was you have a physical device, and that device a user attaches. Then Windows will go to Windows Update, download the driver. Then it will download the device metadata, which will refer to the automatically acquired store app so that the user can acquire all of the software for the device. Now, for a virtual device, that doesn't seem to work in my mind. Maybe I'm missing something, but that's what we focused on. Was that scenario, and that's why I mentioned we focused on physical devices. Now I'll let Mitsuru answer the second question.
Oh, okay. So for the second question, I take the question as how you can show your device to the device's charm, in specific for the second screen or Play 2 devices. So first of all, let me introduce a little bit what the device charm is. The device charm is displaying print, Play 2, and second screen, and tap and send features. So if you have any TV or any projection devices, if your device is supporting DLNA and your device gets a logo from the Windows, then your device will be displayed in the device's charm. So other than that, we don't recommend any other way to develop any driver or any bus driver to make your device displayed in the device's charm. You might be able to hack that. We will try to stop that if you are going to do that. So that is a way to go for the device's charm question. I hope that answers your question.
Well, I mean, so you're basically saying that it's restricted to DLNA. That
So we have the Play 2 and second screen. For the Play 2, yes, it is a DLNA devices only. And for the second screen, we support DVI and VGA and HDMI. So yes, those are the devices will be displayed.
Just to touch on the scenario that I was talking about earlier, the second screen can be certainly enabled with the mechanisms that Mitsuru talked about, or you can also use just general UPnP and then shuttle data back and forth. And it's really the companion experience in the sense of a second screen, so you can show a different experience from what's being viewed, say, on the PC. Does that help answer that?
Sort of.
It sounds like you're driving for a different scenario. Maybe this is actually something we can take offline, but.
Some of this is a little bit of scoping for this discussion. The discussion here really is about custom devices, not to dismiss your question, but if you were building a keyboard device or a display device that doesn't hook up over a traditional USB or PCI bus and have infrastructure that lets that hook into the silo, so if you have a full display driver and it hooks into the display silo, it seems like there's a very likely chance that we will just see it as a monitor and you would be able to use it as a second display. You would not be able to access any custom functionality that wasn't exposed through the existing display, the WinRT display APIs or the graphics subsystem or things like that. But that's also a policy question that goes to graphics, which isn't really represented here. So I think the way to look at that is if you want to hook in through an existing silo, an existing API set, not the custom set, we send the feedback in the scenario to Joseph, and we may be able to hook you up with the right people to talk about it. But I don't know that we're I don't think there's anybody here who could answer which forms of virtualized or network connected HID device we would allow to be accessed as normal input messages. And the same for display. We're not really the experts for that. But we can get you a contact through Joseph. I'll throw him under the bus for that. Did that answer your question? Between all of this, do you, maybe not the answer you want, but.
Well, actually, it sounds like there are several answers. The last one I heard is sort of what I expected. That
okay.
As long as it looks right to the upper layers, then you might be able to do stuff underneath. It might work.
But there is a word of caution, though. It may not be. This is not a scenario we targeted and tested, so there is no guarantee that it will work.
Understood.
Yeah, and from a user experience point of view, and this maybe goes to one of the other questions we've had, if you can get all of the software working so it looks right in the silo, but your installation story doesn't work through Windows Update, then you still have this sort of jarring user experience of I have to go to the desktop and download something and run it, and then maybe this thing works. And that's one thing for a known device class, and we've tried to stay further away from that for the custom case. Like for a custom device, we want you to plug it in, we get the drivers from Woo, we get the app from Woo, and everything just works for the user. That is the ideal user experience. Anything else where you have to go to the desktop and install other software to kind of work around our restrictions, that's, I think, pretty clearly outside of that scope. That's not what we've designed for.
If it seems like you need to do unnatural acts to do what you want to do, and I'm guessing there's at least 3 or 4 people in the room who probably feel that way right now, the simple answer is you're probably attempting to achieve a scenario that we didn't focus on enabling for store apps in Windows 8, and you're probably better off with a desktop app. Don't try to do unnatural acts. Simply put, just to have a new store UI for your device. I apologize if this seems like ultra common sense, but what I find in listening to a lot of partners and working with them over the last year is that we said at Build a year ago, reimagine your device experience as a store app. And what I think a lot of people heard from that was recompile my desktop Win32 app and put a new UX on front of it. But the architectures of the two platforms are wildly different. And the new platform is not the old platform.
So think carefully about what your scenarios are. And are your scenarios really appropriate for the new platform where it is per user app?
Next question. There's one here too.
A question about custom devices and device stage. It seems that device stage is geared towards consumer devices like printers and cameras. Is there a place for industrial applications inside of that device stage experience on the desktop?
So the question is about device stage and whether device stage experience applies to industrial devices and industrial applications. Anybody want to take that?
Can you repeat the question?
So the question is about whether device stage is applicable for industrial devices, industrial device and industrial device applications.
So what kind of industrial device? So device stage supports PC, portable devices, and some limited devices. So what kind of?
Like a USB plug-in device that is just much more rugged than a standard consumer device.
I understand. So the device stage supports only for limited device categories. I think only 7 or 8. So if your device doesn't fall into any of that device category, you cannot use the device stage. So device stage is controlled by the device category. If your device is not them, when you submit the metadata package to the Microsoft service, your metadata package will be failed. So you cannot use the device stage for your device category.
Is there any provision to add like other categories or maybe have a custom category?
Right. So our vision is WSDA Windows Store Device App is going to replace the device stage eventually. So we don't have a plan to extend device stage for now.
Next question. Someone here. Here.
So I have a question regarding, so the device app, when it's automatically downloaded, it's not launched automatically. So can I like bundle my desktop app with the device app and then automatically launch a desktop app or a background app after installation? So the scenario I have is that I have some background app that needs to run for critical device notification and then inform the user that, you have some low battery, etc. So what would be the one way to do that?
So to repeat the question is I have a device for which there is a modern Windows Store device application, and it also wants to do some work in the background to actually monitor the device and provide device notifications. Yep. And is there a way for me to actually do that in Windows 8? Who wants to take that?
So there's I'm going to split this into two questions. On the bundling of desktop stuff with your Windows Store app, the answer is no. Don't do that. In terms of the background work, we have some specific background task affordances inside of Windows 8. In terms of what's available to device apps, it would be the basic sort of background timer triggered tasks, which are limited in terms of resolution. But you could, from one of those, put up a toast just every 15 minutes if you're a lock screen app, check the battery status and put up a toast. But there's no like high frequency or sort of device event triggered background task available in the modern apps.
Okay. So the to add to that, we also didn't want to. We also, in order to save battery life for the system, we explicitly designed it such a way that we don't have too many background tasks active, right? And so the background tasks affordances for Windows Store apps is restricted because we don't want lots of background activity going on that drains the battery of the system. So you have to design your device in such a way that you could get the data from the device when the user launches it, right? Or and so user may not. We also don't want the user to see too many toasts. So we really want the user to when the user launches the app for the device, only then they want to see the information. So that's another thing to consider.
And I have a second
So
question.
I just want to clarify one thing. They said there's no way to do background task for devices. For the print people in the room, there is a way to do background work for print notifications, low ink. As you know, you can define the messages in the XML file that comes with your device, and the system will toast on your behalf. And when the user clicks the toast, we will launch your application for you.
And I have a second question, and this is regarding ARM. So I think in the previous session, we were told that we need to work with individual OEMs to go ahead and make our drivers work on ARM. So could you provide more information as far as what would be the process in order for us to have our peripherals work on ARM platform?
So are you an IHV who builds device for an OEM platform?
Yes.
Okay. Is it an external device or an internal device?
External.
External. Okay. So the question is, you are an external device, and you would like to get. Do you require a custom driver?
Yes.
So you have a custom driver that you want to get it working on an ARM system.
Yes.
Or a Windows RT system.
Yes.
Okay. Who wants to take that?
So we had different goals with the ARM platform for Windows 8. And most of our goals for peripherals for Windows RT systems were around using peripherals can use the Microsoft provided in-box class drivers. My favorite example of this, one that like my wife loves, is I take pictures, I have my photos on my USB stick, and I can plug them in to my Windows 8 tablet. Right? And that's all supported using in-box drivers. We did not have a goal in Windows 8 for Windows RT systems to have custom drivers for peripherals. We focused on enabling peripherals that used our in-box class drivers. Printers is another fine example. Mobile broadband is another fine example of that. So it's basically up to OEMs to govern what drivers are pre-installed with their ARM systems. The process is to work with the OEMs to do so. And if you have further questions on this, you can follow up with Joseph.
Next question. So it looks like we have about 8 more minutes, so I guess we can squeeze in maybe 2 or 3 questions.
On the storage device side, is SCSI pass-through direct still supported?
So your question is whether SCSI's direct access is supported, and are you talking about desktop apps or Windows Store apps?
Well, let's keep it with the store.
Okay, and there's so direct access. Does that require a custom driver?
No, it's a USB mass storage class emulating device. It looks exactly like a storage device. It shows up as a drive letter. It has an about.txt, but the actual API is exposed through the SCSI pass-through.
Okay, and does it show up as a so it shows up in the file system and it can be browsed through from Explorer?
Yep.
You can build a device. You should be able to build a device app for it and use, right? Okay. You should be able to build a device store app for it, and you would use the Windows.Storage APIs. Basically, they expose the, any drive letter through the file APIs. So you work with folders and files, and I think you might not have programmable access to it. It depends on whether it shows up as internal storage or external storage, I think. So if it's internal storage, then you shouldn't need a capability. So I'll follow up with you offline for that.
So everything Lisa said applies to the storage aspect of the device. If it's a disk, these are how you access content on the disk. You cannot send SCSI pass-through commands. You can't send any custom SCSI commands to a device through the WinRT APIs. You can still do it from desktop, but you couldn't do it from the MetroStyle app, unless you built a custom driver that sat on top of that USB mass storage device and had a private interface.
Okay.
But then you wouldn't be able to access it as a storage device anymore. It would be a completely custom device. And to be honest, that's an idea I've just kind of thrown out there. I'm not entirely sure what the ramifications are of loading your own driver on top of our USB mesh storage. You could take over the entire device based on its hardware ID and do something like that.
All right. Thank you again.
So there's a question here.
Hi, my question relates to printers and deployment. In, say, a corporate environment, or in the last talk, there was the installation was the user plugs in the device into their machine directly, and everything gets installed automatically. Is there anything different with deployment in a corporate environment, say, where you know, an individual user wouldn't be physically connected to the device, and they may want to, the IT department might want to deploy the driver centrally through like Active Directory or what used to be Active Directory and that kind of thing?
Let me try and address your question this way. The intent is, oh, sorry. I believe you're asking about, does IT have any special way of deploying the drivers for printing and the applications for printing in Windows, for Windows Store applications? Is that correct? Yeah, and the drivers as well. So if the device is directly plugged in, it's no different than any other device in the system. We follow the same model as all of the devices, even for printers, with respect to install, except with one exception for the version 4 drivers, is we follow the new rules for installers, so there's no custom actions, no anything. We're quite strict. Now, as for enterprise environments, we do have an affordance in enterprise environments for the way the printer driver works. You can actually install the printer driver on your system through policies like you suggested, and it will seed the driver install for you. And this is actually using System Center or some other mechanism is what we're recommending moving forward. I think contact us offline, and I think there's a white paper somewhere I can point you to. And as it also will deploy the desktop apps that go along with those printer drivers. As an example, we've piloted that internally, so I'm pretty certain it works well, because that's how we all print every day.
So in the previous talk, there was some mention about a device app not being allowed to access other system resources, and the rationale for that was given as since modern UI applications are supposed to be specific for the user and not allowed to modify system properties, then they should not try to access those type of system resources. So my question is, we have a system service that runs in conjunction with our driver, and that service is actually just in order to allow serialization of the calls to the driver. So would accessing this service from a user mode driver, for instance, would that be okay? So the scenario would be that a modern UI device application would access a custom driver, and that custom driver would in turn also access a system service running in the background in order to access the hardware directly, in order to just enable the synchronization of the calls. And this is not in order to modify anything of the system type.
So let me rephrase the question. So the question is, you have a system service that talks to a custom driver, and you want to write a Windows Store application that essentially talks to a user mode driver, which then talks to the service, which then talks to your other custom driver. And whether is that possible? Is that your question?
Basically, yes. Just I wanted to stress the fact that this service is there just in order to synchronize calls to the driver and not in order to access any or modify anything, any system-wide parameters.
Okay. So in theory, since it's a custom driver, it will follow all the custom driver policies. So you can, whatever policies that we have talked about, device metadata, restricted applications, those things should work. But if you already have a user mode driver that that gets a request fronts a request from the app, you probably may not require a service to serialize the request to the other driver. But yeah, in theory, if you have a custom driver, it should work.
And perhaps this goes to George's comment earlier about jumping through a lot of hoops to enable specific scenarios. If it sounds a little bit difficult, then it's probably not supported, or something that we've not specifically done work for. In this case, installing that particular service, you would need a handle on your own, for example. Right?
Yeah.
So I'd encourage all you folks to go out and review the store apps policy, certification requirements and policies. These do get revised over time. There was one piece of language I recall, but please go out and review it, but it's there is a principle that we have with the new platform, which is that new store apps are isolated from the rest of the system. Like, they're not supposed to talk to desktop apps, they're not supposed to talk to Win32 services or things like that. So I encourage you to also review the store certification requirements and so on and so forth to get an answer to that question. Because I believe there's some language there around that case. I also believe that there's also some language around don't work around system limitations.
So it's 1 o'clock, so our time is up.
Actually, no, I've just got one question, or one point. You guys are extremely important to us, and I think we're all really glad to see you here, and I really appreciate all the hard questions you've asked us. I will ask you to continue to participate in Windows with us, and one specific request is we potentially have questionnaires, surveys that we want to be able to send out. So if you can contact me, my email address was somewhere there. Contact me and let me know if you want to participate. We have questions that we'd like to be able to ask you to get some information about things that you're doing, things you'd like to do, things that work or don't work. And as well, anytime you want to send feedback, by all means, please do so. We're always open to that. That's it.
Thank you very much.